Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. And Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. And you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today it is my very great pleasure to introduce you to Jack Saward. And Jack is going to talk to us about the world of events. Now, Jack brings a wealth of knowledge and experience from both the public and the private sectors to his work. He's been involved with the event industry for as long as he can remember, and he has seen firsthand how businesses have had to evolve within the ever-changing markets that they currently live in. With a vast experience of working in the UK and Europe, he has also had the opportunity to work on different projects in North America, China, and Africa. Welcome, Jack, and thank you for joining me today.
Rose, hi, lovely to meet you.
And you. So we were just talking before we came on air that the events industry has taken a really, really hard knock the last 18 months or so, and how people have had to, I guess, take their in-person events to an online format. How have you been finding that in your business, especially?
Yeah, I think people noticed a real need to change, but they weren't sure how to change. You know, they weren't sure how to utilize their budgets effectively, and there was that worry that struck. You know, in terms of, oh no, we had this all planned out. Now what are we going to do? Who do we ask, and who do we get to facilitate? Because I think for all there were options out there, no one really quite knew how to utilize them to the best of their abilities. And some people just weren't interested. Some people were just straightforward. No, I'll just wait. You know,
Yeah,
I'll
I
just
found
wait
that.
because I don't want to do it another way. This is what works for us. So it's been a little bit of, I don't know, the role has changed to kind of a coaching, mentoring type role, you know, in terms of just to help people understand the possibilities that are out there, and then find what fits. And if it doesn't fit, don't force something that doesn't fit just because you feel as though you should be because everyone else is.
Yeah, I agree. But and we were talking about this also, how and I've talked about it with other people over the months about how the pandemic has been helpful in allowing us to connect to people that we wouldn't have within our proximity as a rule. So I think, you know, because we've had to move online, we get to, we'll save money for a start because we don't have to travel. And if you're a speaker or whatever, you don't need to pay for catering. You don't need to, you know, hire a room, and you just go online. It's just so much simpler and so much more cost effective. So
it can be. I would say it can be. I wouldn't say in every eventuality it is, but I think it can be, and that it really is depending on what your objectives are.
okay.
You know, there's certain events that I think work really effectively online, and I think have a place to remain there moving forward. There's other events that I still feel that in person is the better experience and the more outcome focused experience. So again, I think it's working through those options, and what I now believe is as event planners, we've got another tool in our toolbox. You know, in terms of now that we've got all these options available, we can discuss those with clients and say, well, what are your thoughts? What are the main aims of this for you? And then we can discuss what is the best platform to be able to do that with, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, whether it's the mix, the hybrid type of event, and really discuss the options and try and take them on that journey, you know, in terms of to offer the experience that they're hoping for.
Yeah, here in Australia, there are a lot of people that were doing, you know, exclusively in-person events have actually moved to a hybrid format because, you know, the people that can't travel because of travel restrictions and so forth can still join their event, you know, and so they still get bums on seats, basically.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting in terms of how they manage the costs associated with that, because we've had these discussions recently in terms of a couple of peers in the industry, and hybrid doesn't necessarily mean any cheaper. It can often mean more expensive.
No.
You know, you're trying to run two events at one event, so you've got to be able to. You can't just say, "Oh, that's easy. We'll now do a hybrid." Well, that will have an impact on your budget somewhere. So you've got to be able to manage that and effectively plan it if that's the option that you're looking to take.
Yeah, no, that's quite true, because you actually need someone who's a bit tech savvy if you aren't, and someone that sits behind the scenes and runs all the live, the cameras and the interaction with the audience that's online and all those sorts of things. So, and there is a cost involved in that in most cases. So yeah, I do get that it can be, well, and yeah, you're right, you're effectively running two events.
Yeah, and offering two experiences, because undoubtedly the person behind the camera is going to have a different experience to the person sat in that very room. So it's being able to merge those two experiences so they both become equally as immersive. And sometimes that means adapting the way that you would have ran the in-person event to ensure that behind the camera virtual element is still experiencing something. And there's also going to be issues in terms of venues, appropriate venues to be able to run a hybrid event, the infrastructure in place to be able to live stream a whole event. Some of the older venues, for example, I'm sure you'll have the same issue across in Australia and New Zealand areas. Some of the older venues just simply haven't got the infrastructure to be able to dedicate supply to run a live stream. But they're fantastic in-person venues.
Yeah.
So, organisers really do have to be thinking smartly in terms of what is going to be the best venue to host your events.
I've noticed, though, that a lot of places, venues that are allowing hybrid events have actually lessened their rates because of the fact that, they're getting a bang for their buck. At least they're getting people to the venue. So, they're trying to facilitate a hybrid event much more easily and making it a bit more cost effective.
Yeah,
have you found that in the UK or not?
I think we all do. I think we all have to look at how we get events back on their feet again. I think that's the primary first and foremost. We need to get people wanting to attend and wanting to engage in events again. And that's a collective responsibility. That's not just the venues, that's the planners, that's the visitors, that's the exhibitors, the companies responsible for the sponsors. Everyone has to say, this is such an important part of our economies. How do we all, the wrong analogy in these terms, but how do we all hold hands together?
Yeah.
To take this forward again? We may have to take a backward step to then move forward again. And I think it's that collective discussion to make sure everyone is being able to move forward together.
Now, I understand that you're into professional cuddles, Jack.
Yeah, this came about a few years ago. I was working on an event in America, and the contractor that I was dealing with just made an observation in terms of the way I was treating them. And I've been brought up with a philosophy: it doesn't matter what role you do, everyone's as important as each other. So I will always go out of my way to make sure that I say hi to the security, to the first aid, to the cleaning. It's just part of what I'm about. And she said, well, I've never felt like this before. I've always been a contractor. And I said, no, you're an extended member of our team delivering this experience. And I said, my customers put in that much trust in me to deliver their experience. What I try and reassure them with is like if you had a relative who was upset, you'd give them a cuddle. And you give them a cuddle because you want them to feel that comfort, that reassurance that everything's going to be okay. And I said, that's probably the best analogy I could use for what I do with my customers. I want them to trust in the fact that if there's an issue, if there's a problem, they're reassured that it'll all be organized, it'll all be okay. And when I used that term, I said, so it's a bit like a professional cuddle then. And it's kind of stuck since then. I said, I don't go around cuddling every single one of my customers, but it's kind of that's my approach to business. I want every customer to feel as though they're receiving a professional cuddle, and they can be reassured that even if there is a problem on site, they don't need to worry about it because I'd have seen it and I've found a solution for it. So yeah, it's kind of stuck since then.
Yeah, no, that's really cute. I think you need to make your clients, customers, you need to make them feel like they're the most important person in the room, and then and the rest of your team is just as important. And from the cleaner to the security guy to the speaker, I mean, they've all got a role to play, and they should all be treated with respect and on equal footing. I think no one's lesser than the next person.
I completely agree. They're all part of delivering that experience for either your customer or for the service user. So if you've had a battle with them throughout, that's going to impact on the end result. In some way, whether it be that they just a little bit obnoxious and they won't let the customer on to stand until right on the dot of the opening, or something like that. It's just part of the experience that you're creating. So even things like, we've done events where by the end of the day, we've got cleaners coming on to stand and we've still got some hospitality left over from the day. And I've just left them a plated up plate each with a drink each and said, when you're finished, I know you won't have eaten yet. There's something there for you. Just drop it into the bin when you're clearing off the stand. It doesn't take a lot. Generally speaking, that hospitality in terms of normally at the end of the day, normally goes in and is wasted hospitality.
Absolutely.
But I guarantee they'll remember your stand. They'll remember being looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. We do that with our events as well. If there's something left over and the cleaners are there or whoever, if they haven't eaten and we know that they haven't eaten, well, we'll just give them what's left over and have a party while you're there, while you're doing your work, basically. So yeah. So tell me a little bit more. How would you deal with a customer that's a little bit obnoxious and their ego's a bit too large?
Oh, we've all had some of them, haven't we? We've all dealt with some of them, and I think it's about one of the tactics I always use. Sometimes they just like to have their say. They like to have their opinion heard. So sometimes with events, you've just got to facilitate that. Sometimes you've got to come up with a scenario where you're engaging with them and asking them to provide the solution and you're giving them offers. And you're quite happy with any of the answers. So you've actually provided maybe 2 or 3. Look, we've got this scenario. We're thinking about doing this, this, or this. Which do you think will work? You're quite happy with any one of those 3, but the customer has been engaged now to be involved in that decision-making process. And if they feel as though they are right from the off, there's no need for them to find a reason to be further on down the line. And I think it's about having that clear communication strategy and understanding people. I love people. I love getting to know people. I love watching people. I'm a people watcher. I sit at the airport and I'm one of those that there's a delay. Oh, that's disappointing. But whilst I'm watching, I'll look at behaviours and people's behaviours around, because I think you can learn so much from just taking a step back and watching. And I think that's the same with customers. If you actually, one of the best forms of communication is actively listening. And I think if you manage and you develop that skill, it will help you understand customers. And as I say, you will always get, I'll give it a quick example to you. I was asked to deliver some training to a customer for one of their exhibition stands. He was really concerned. He said, I've got some great sales team, but they just never seem to work well on a trade stand. And I said, that's fine. Yeah, we can go in and deliver some training. And he warned me. He says, they are old school. They have been doing their jobs for a while. So I prepared some training, walked into the session. And all I can give you as a description is I walked into a room of silverback gorillas. That's the best thing I could say.
Wow.
They were literally dominant 40 to 60-year-old men who knew everything. So the whole training had to change on a turn. That what I had planned, I completely changed. And the way I changed it is I just said, right, well, I'm not here to deliver training. I'm here to facilitate you coming up with the solutions for your stand. And all I did was just drip feed ideas into it that they felt as though they were coming up with all the solutions and all of the ideas, whereas in fact, I was just leading the conversation. So I think sometimes you just have to manage a situation and manage the people in and around you so they feel as though they've got that element of control and decision making, whilst at the same time, you're getting it in the direction of travel that you and your contracted employer wanted anyway.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't be in the events industry anyway if you're not a good communicator, I don't think.
I completely agree. I think it's a skill that can be developed, but I think you've just got to have something about you anyway. There's just that something inside you. You can normally tell with a child when they're 9, 10, 11 years old, just their ability to engage with others. You can see it very early on.
Okay, so I guess in what you're doing, and we've touched on having to move online, and the hybrid breed of events at the time. But what would be the advice you would give to an in-person, someone that's used to doing in-person events, and they can no longer do them because let's face it, lockdown's going to come and go for the next few years, I believe. So how can they become confident in an online presence?
It's an interesting one, this one, because I'm of the ilk as well, though, that I think in-person events can happen if done safely. And I just think governments are still in that very nervous stage over allowing them to happen safely. I'm not sure how things are operating across with you in Australia at the minute, but I walk into our local supermarket and I think we could run an event safer than this. And it's that sort of approach. So we've got, I think across our industry, we've got some of the best health and safety experts across any industry. And I've always, since lockdown, I've always been of the belief that they have been so underutilized, it's untrue. Because if our health and safety experts said we can't run that event, we wouldn't run the event. So I think there's got to be that adoption of, let's utilize the skilled practitioners that we've got available. So on that side, I wouldn't be dismissing live events. But in answer to your question specifically, I think there are so many different platforms out there. It's about finding one that you feel comfortable with and also finding something that works for what your objectives are. There's some really fancy platforms out there that would actually confuse 90% of the people accessing them. I use two terms when I talk about events. I talk about user journey and user experience. And that doesn't matter whether it's in person or whether it's online. The same two principles apply. So if you create a journey that is too complicated, you've lost them. So it's about cutting through and getting to the easy part of the process. IKEA, the big Swedish manufacturing firm, do it perfectly in terms of you can see IKEA, you know where you're headed for the entrance door, and then they take you on a journey.
Yes, they do actually,
They direct you on a journey, and it's very clear, and understand what experience you're going to expect. And I think that's the same with live and virtual. If you're logging on to attend a virtual event, you want to be taken on a journey, but you don't want that journey to be confusing. It needs to be straightforward. You need to get the information that you attended for. You don't need all the fluffy bits around the outside.
Yeah, the bells and whistles.
You need to feel comfortable that you've got to the right place, you've got there on time, you haven't missed anything, and there's Rose. I'm here. I know I'm going to get what I've come to expect. So I think one of the things that people did wrong to begin with, they used the term, we're just moving the event online. Well, they weren't. They were creating a completely different event and a completely different experience online. So initially you had all these people who had this in-person experience who were going to the virtual event and weren't getting that fulfilled because the expectation was different to what the reality was. And I think we've got far better now. A lot of the platforms out there have got far better at helping organisers to facilitate what the experience is going to be. So it goes back to communication again. It's just a different form of communication. It's selling what the experience is going to be. If you tell people what to expect and you give them that, they go away fulfilled. If you try and say, this is what we've always done and we're moving it online, you're not going to be able to give that same experience. So people will go away disappointed. So it's a real, don't try and be something that you're not. Experience, the other thing I would say is experience some of the platforms out there. The first thing I did, my last in-person event was in Vegas last March, when everything began to close, when all the lights of Vegas switched off, the MGM was closing. I was trying to wait for a relief flight home. And on that flight home, I said to myself, right, when I get back, I'm going to try and experience as many different platforms that there are out there. So I was attending textile events in Dubai, dental shows in Europe. I was attending them not for the information that was being given, was for the experience that had been created. I wanted to see how each of the platforms took you on that journey, because I would then be able to, as an event planner, I would then be able to think, oh, I could see how that would work for that customer, or I could see how that would work for that show. And I think that's one of the things I would encourage people to do. A lot of these events are still free to attend. Go and experience the different platforms. Get a feel for how your journey felt going through that process and what the good, the bad, and the ugly was, because that then helps you build your brief for if you had to run an event yourself. So yeah, always useful to just go out there and experience what's out there.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Have you written a book on this subject at all?
No. I've chatted at a few things. I've been asked to, because obviously, like most of the event professionals, our job book went off the cliff because everything closed, and rightly so. And I was asked on a few of the initial panels I spoke on, why are you so positive, Jack? You've just lost all your business. And I said, yeah, but I'm still healthy at the minute, which is more than some people. And I can only control what's in my circle of control. Everything that's happening around and about, I can have my say on it, but I don't control it. So if you focus on that element and say, well, what can I control? What's in my power to develop? Can I go out and do some more training? Can I get a part-time job just to pay the bills at the minute and just keep the business running and the employees, employed? And I think that's the important thing at the minute. We've had to adapt, but we've had to make sure that our customers are looked after, because they're long-term customers. I don't think any of us sets out in business to work with someone once. They want to build that relationship, so they're working with them for 6, 7, 8, sometimes 30, 40 years down the line. Those relationships. So I think that was my main focus, was to get out there, because I knew my customers would be saying, Jack, what do we do? And I wanted to have some of that knowledge to say, well, there's a few options out there available. This is what we could do. If I hadn't have done that, what service am I providing for my customers?
Yes. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people that that do what you do didn't see it like that, and they just closed their doors and threw their hands up in the air and said, well, let's just give up.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's not giving up. Sometimes it's the realization that they can't see a way out, so they need to find something else. And one of my best chippies, one of my best carpenters in America, who I use every show that I'm across in America, he's doing kitchen fitting now. And he's not going to come back to events. He's already said, he says, I'm now working 9 till 5. I go home on an evening, I see the kids. Yes, I'm not earning quite as much money as I was before, but the balance is better. I just don't think I'll come back. And then there's another one who's doing deliveries for Amazon. One of my graphics guys is doing deliveries for Amazon across here in the UK. And he says, I can't wait to get back on site again, Jack. I've just missed the buzz of an event. So I think everyone will be to their own. I think people have their own choices to make. I think we will have a skill shortage. But I also know we've got a huge generation of new event professionals who are finishing university, who will help us take our events industry forward. I really do believe that, because we're entering into a new way of running events, and some of those younger generations are far more tech savvy than me.
Yeah.
So you need that new pair of eyes at times. That's the way I stay feeling young in events, is by always bringing new faces to the team, because they will ask the stupid question, because they're not sure. And sometimes that stupid question is a critical question. So when I'm doing my coaching, I will always say there is no such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is the question not asked, because it could be critical to that service delivery. So that's why a lot of students have obviously missed out on their placement years. They're worried now in terms of getting jobs in the industry because there's so many unemployed. And my view is that there will always be space for good candidates in our industry, because we have always kept recruiting new faces into the industry, because it's the only way we stay young. It's the only way we stay fresh with our ideas.
Yeah, totally. Now, I see that you have a couple of LinkedIn profiles. You're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, and you have a website.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely everywhere.
Well, I think one of the important things is that people still realise that we're here as businesses. For all they may not know who you are, where you are, what you do, they want to know that you're still there. I've had a couple of customers who said, Jack, we've got this project. I'm just checking that you're still okay to support us with that. And we've had other customers who contacted us during that period and said, would you be able to help us with this? We were recommended you. It's just that ours has gone bust.
No.
The current supplier has gone bust. So one of the things that we really did do is we said, look, there's not a lot of new content we can put out there at the minute, because we haven't been out on site much. We've been doing bits. I was helping with Matchroom boxing over the weekend, doing some project management for that. I've done a couple of online bits recently. I've got another activation project coming up next month. But the important thing is so people still realise that you're there, and you're there should they want to pick the phone up. And I think that's an important thing. Don't spread yourself too thin. Don't think as though you've got to get hugely dramatic content out there. Just keep reminding people that you are there. And should they need you, they can pick up the phone, they can email and get in touch.
Yeah. So where would be the best platform to reach you? Would it be LinkedIn or Facebook or at your website?
I always enjoy connecting with people, like-minded people on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's a good thing. I also say to people, look, you get to know about me on LinkedIn as well, because, read the testimonials. People will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly about me. So, I think that's a good thing. I think I'd much rather, whenever we get a new inquiry, I say, that's great. Let's have a chat online. Before doing that, please go to the LinkedIn profile or the website, see what others say about me. And if you want to cancel the call, well, that's fine. But if you do want to continue with the call, great, because we've just cut out 20 minutes of me having to try and sell myself on that initial call.
Yeah. I hate doing that.
Yeah. And we're not good at it, are we? No one's really good in person. No, because we don't always like to boast.
No,
we feel true. It's boasted. And to be honest, sales, at times you can feel as though you're overselling. So that's my philosophy. I always say to people, have a look at what others say about me. If you want to speak to any of my customers, there's many of my customers who've always said, if you get an inquiry and everyone wants to know about you, Jack, I'm more than happy to speak to them. That's how I try and sell our approach to business.
Good approach, actually.
Yeah, and it kind of moves us quicker into the project detail, because a lot of the time people are approaching you with very tight timelines to get stuff done. So it's about how we speed that process up in terms of getting to the core detail.
So you have a podcast, by the looks of it, Jack.
Yeah, that wasn't something, I don't know whether you'd ever planned on doing yours.
No, I didn't. No.
No, wasn't something that I'd ever planned on doing. And then during these discussions, these panel discussions, one of our fellow speakers said, Jack, you should really do a podcast. And I went, really? And they said, well, yeah, just talk about, keeping things fresh, keeping, what our industry is about. So I was attending a networking group at the time, which had a complete range of people from different sectors, you know. And I said to them, what are your thoughts? And everyone said, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And I said, okay, I'll do it on one condition, that you lot are all involved in it. So the photography, all the photos from it was one of the photographers who was unemployed. The website was created from a web guy who was unemployed. The audio, the music that's on there was from a musician, a really talented young musician who was unemployed at the time. So I basically said, yes, these are people that I've only met through lockdown. I've got them in my phone, other people, but all these people involved with the podcast were people I hadn't met before. I'd only met them during lockdown. And I said, we'll do it as long as we're all involved in it. And then all we've done is we've tried to create a little energy boost, you know, in terms of event industry energy boost. It's only between 30 and 40 minutes. So it's perfect for if you're taking the dog out for a walk or going for a run on the treadmill. And we just invite event professionals from all across the world to come and say, why events? Why are you involved in events? What was your journey like? What's been the best bit of advice you've been given? What's been your favorite event that you worked on? So it allows people that if they are feeling, when's this going to end? They can just have that little pick me up. You know, they can, yeah, that's why I want to be in events as well. Or that's really good advice. So we've enjoyed it. We've now got to 37 different countries downloading the podcast. We're having a lot of fun. We have a wrap session at the end of each series where we get listeners on to come and tell us what they thought of the guests. So the guests are loving that because they're listening into that and they're saying, oh, that was the bit that they took away. I thought it would have been this. So it's good for their learning as well in terms of the bits that are resonating with listeners. And as long as I'm having fun with it, I'll continue to do it, you know, because I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, so for our listeners, it's called the Events Insight Podcast. It's with Jack Saward. So there we go. You can find his company page on LinkedIn under the Events Insight Podcast. So there you go. And Jack's website is saward-me.com. So if you want to find Jack through there, please go and have a look. Jack, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Do you have any wise words before we go?
Your connection. So I did a talk very early on, and I said the importance of your phone book. Now more than ever, the people that you have in that phone book are your extended team. So make sure you touch base with them. And one little thing I gave someone was, have a look through your messages and have a look through your WhatsApp messages. Go to the very bottom of those messages and see who you haven't messaged in a long, long time, and just drop them a message to see how they're doing. You don't know how critical that message could be for one of those individuals. So reach out to people in your phone book and make contact with them.
Good. Thank you for that. It's been an absolute pleasure, Jack. Thank you so much. And we'll probably talk again later on in the year.
I do hope so. Appreciate
Thanks, Jack. Bye-bye.
Talking with the experts.